Hi, everyone. Welcome to our church development webinar, getting started with a church capital campaign. We're just going to give a minute to let the Zoom robots do their thing and let everyone into the meeting here. Just a revisit of today's topic. We are following up with our webinar that we hosted in December on preparing for a capital campaign in the new year. That was a little bit more theoretical. This is aimed to be a very action-oriented, strategic guide to launching, getting ready to launch your capital campaign this year. So we're looking forward to having you all with us today. As always, our recordings are available on our YouTube channel. So if you want to share this content with someone else on your committee or with your pastor or someone else in your diocese, you are welcome to do that. The recording will go out about 24 hours after we're finished with this live session. There's also a lot of additional trainings and downloadable guides on our website and on our YouTube channel. You can email us specific questions. We're happy to answer your particular situations, questions, and you're also always welcome to call Dennis and ask him for some guidance. Today, we're going to be covering just a quick introduction to church development for those of you who may have not been introduced to us before. And then we're going to talk about, like I said, those action-oriented strategies for preparing for your capital campaign launch. We're going to talk about gathering information, what information you need to have ready, engaging your leaders. Who are the leaders that you want to be gathering their views and opinions about the campaign project, building consensus with the community at large and how to do that, conducting your feasibility study and why that's important and how to do it, and then communicating with the whole community and everybody about what you guys are about to undertake. And then a final step on, get us started now. So we've got a plan where we can do this, you can do this, and we will help you with learning the next steps today. So a little bit about church development. We are a stewardship-based consulting firm working with churches of all denominations in the U.S. We were founded in 1992 and have worked with over 300 churches to do capital campaigns and have raised over $1 billion in our tenure. We use research-based practices in our fundraising methods, and that's informed by our mission, which is a focus on prayerful discernment and community building instead of pressure and divide and conquer with major donors. We don't want to be pushing people or making people feel pressured into giving or obligated. We really try to base our asks in prayer and discerning what God's call is for each individual person. That's just a little bit more on this slide. We use our the industry standards of best practices and from a stewardship mindset. And our work proceeds from 1 Peter 4:10 scripturally. We see ourselves as stewards of what God has given us, and our job is to figure out what He is calling us to give back and how we can do that. And we try to facilitate that philosophy in our churches that we work with. So I'm going to introduce or ask our presenters to introduce themselves today. We have one bonus presenter too, who's not on here, Christian. So Dennis, you want to get us started? And then Peter and Christian, you can introduce yourselves as well.
Yes, that'd be great. Is my microphone working okay?
Yes, you sound good.
Victory of technology. Fantastic. So I'm Dennis Green, and I've been doing this work, Church Capital Campaign, since 1992. And then for 10 years before that, I did similar work with nonprofit organizations. So I feel like I learned a great deal from the secular world before my desire to incorporate my faith in my work life resulted in church development. And I love this work. I love my coworkers. They're brilliant and cool people. And this is how I made a ton of friends. This is how I met my wife through a church capital campaign. So I'm very happy that you are joining us. And now let me turn it over to Peter, since his picture is there on the screen. Fire away, Peter.
Thank you, Dennis, and good day to everyone who is joining us. We're so excited and thankful that you could join this podcast. And I am Peter Kardash. I'm a senior consultant with Church Development, and I work with many churches in organizing and help managing the day-to-day activity of their campaigns. And I know a number of churches that I've worked with. Members of those churches have joined these podcasts and have enjoyed them and have given us really robust feedback and insights into their needs and future programming that we will do. I'm so excited that today I can share some of my experiences and best practices in working campaigns with churches with you, and look for help and value in developing your campaigns. So with that, I will introduce Christian Watkins, and sorry, I don't know if you see her or not, but Christian, why don't you introduce yourself?
I will. Thank you so much, Peter. And if folks can't see me, you'll get to hear my voice. My name's Christian, like the religion. I've been working in ministry for over a decade now. And I have gotten to work with congregations, mostly in youth and young adult ministry, and then also on college campuses. So I've really enjoyed getting to be involved in lots of different parts of church world. I lived in Turkey, in Istanbul, Turkey, and studied language there. So I have a background in language and really enjoy having a global perspective on the Christian tradition. I'm finishing my PhD, and one of the reasons I was drawn to this position is because of that research part of what we're doing and combining that with the faith part. I think that coming from an approach that's a research-based approach, sometimes folks don't know what that means, but for me, it means that it's getting more people involved. And so my PhD has focused on community-based research and how to approach questions about being involved in community from a lens, which might sound kind of crazy, but it's actually something folks can do. So things like interviews or focus groups or collaborating with teams is a thing that I specialize in. I have my master's from Yale, and I was raised in a small town, so I have quite um, I don't know, a perspective on what it is to be in different parts of the US. So I'm really excited to be a part of this team, and you're getting to see some of the wonderful faces of folks I get to work with. And I'm really excited to learn from our clients and from the congregations that we serve too.
Great, thank you. Now, Meredith, you've got to introduce yourself too.
Oh, yeah, I guess I forgot. I forgot to do that. I'm Meredith Miravalli. I have worked in ministry with church development for almost 10 years, doing marketing and support services for our clients, providing resources and trainings and video content for people who are just getting to know us and our clients all through the campaign process and into their follow-up period. Before that, I did campus ministry at high school level and worked in human services with a couple of different nonprofit organizations. And I'm also, like everyone here, a bit of a church nerd with a certificate in spiritual mentorship and a master's from Franciscan University. So just that's a little bit about me. I am, on a personal level, I am 1 month away from having my third baby. So this will be my last webinar for a minute, but I'm looking forward to coming back and doing some more later in this year.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, Dennis, do you want to talk a little bit about where some of the resource,
Certainly.
The data comes from that we're pulling from today?
Certainly. We have kept track of the capital campaign successes and failures over the past 30 years. And we have summarized that data in this book, The Stewardship System, which is the subtitle is How to Increase Generosity Without Fundraising. So there are a lot of activities you can do that will result in greater generosity without any of the pressure of fundraising. So we collected a lot of data about our work. We also looked to the world of academia I'm particularly fond of this author who won a Nobel Prize in behavioral economics. It really helped us improve our method of serving churches. We're also members of the International Catholic Stewardship Council, National Association of Church Business Administrators, and a bunch of other organizations from whom we gather data and insights so we can share that with our churches that we serve. So this is not an opinion. This is based in a whole ton of success. And let me go back and emphasize, each of us is going to talk, and we're going to talk about both successes and failures. And we'll have lots of case studies of both. Okay, Meredith, back over to you.
Yeah, so our agenda for today, we're going to talk about 5 big topics and lots of little details underneath them of things that we really recommend that you get in line prior to doing your capital campaign. And this is really going to set your community up for success with communicating your vision, with getting everybody on board and building that consensus, which is going to be the key to a successful capital campaign, as opposed to one in which you have lackluster financial results and a lot of maybe dismay about how things were conducted. We see a lot of that. Oftentimes we are hired to run follow-up campaigns, like a second campaign after a first one that was conducted with a high pressure approach. And those often are difficult situations that churches are in as a result of not having done some of this work as a preparation. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about when it doesn't go well as well, also, so you can kind of hear from that side of it. But we'll launch into gathering information, like I said, what kind of information you want to be getting, engaging leaders, how to do that, who to do that with, how to build consensus, what it looks like to do a feasibility study, and then how to communicate all of that so that you are ready to move ahead, guns a-blazing, so to speak. So we'll get started here with gathering information. And Peter, can I tally it to you to talk a little bit about what this process looks like?
Absolutely, Meredith. Thank you. So, like any great idea, a campaign is born or started with identifying a need or a challenge within a church. And a great example of this, with many churches are going through, is the need for more space. And that may be brought about by observing the challenges in scheduling rooms, whether it be classrooms or conference rooms or meeting rooms. It can be seen looking at the disruption that occurs that when you have a wedding or a funeral and there's a reception, that the people walk through hallways of classrooms in order to get to a place where they're going to gather to eat. But the key is that someone, lots of times it's the pastor, lots of times it can be a leadership group, or it could be an individual parishioner who brings up a need to the church. So it all starts with that challenge of what the church is experiencing and needing to do something about it. So next, and taking that in light, is the gathering of information, and as much as possible, measurable information that deals with human impact, facilities, and costs. And Dennis, anything that you can share that identifies what are we talking about here that a church might be looking for in these respects?
Yes, the church pictured here on the right, Prince of Peace, did a great job of what is listed on your agenda there as B, A, B, and C. And so they were able to quantify by surveying members, A, what's the impact on you? So they have they look at their calendar and they saw how every meeting space was taken. And it was like a cup that runneth over. They couldn't tell how many meetings they lost out on that were basically that didn't happen because there was no space available. So they did a survey to answer that question. So what meetings would you like to have space for? How frequently were you denied space? And then they really wanted to quantify that. And they looked at a couple of different options, like Prince of Peace looked at adding portable temporary buildings, and that's less than optimal. You know, they're mobile homes. And when they shared with the community the quantification of our need, and then they presented the option of we can get some portable mobile homes out in the parking lot, they were met with a great deal of disapproval. People did not want to do that. And they made a point of saying, well, gosh, it only cost $40,000 to put up a couple of these. Then we think that's an option to consider. And the feedback was overwhelming. We don't want mobile homes in the parking lot. What is the cost of adding on to our building to meet our needs? And that's when we leaped into action. Now, item E is here on your agenda. It's up to you if we do the wealth research. It's not very expensive, but it will tell you who you should certainly invite to get involved. So I just presented the wealth research at a church last night, and without naming any names, I said, you have one person who has the giving capacity to donate $5 million. You have 7 people who have the capacity to donate $1 million. So I propose we get them involved. Let's find a way to put them on a committee to survey, to engage them, and so that it is not random, but rather very deliberate. Okay, I'm
Yes.
rambling on. Let's go to the next one.
One final thing on that too, Dennis.
Sure.
I didn't put it on here, but we also recommend that the wealth research happens internally in looking at the church giving history and who your past top donors to your organization can be. In addition to the third-party wealth research that shows the capacity of your parishioners. So
Yep. Very smart. So look at who has been among your top dozen donors in the past. That's a great place to start.
okay. All right, next we're looking at how are we going to engage those leaders, some of whom come from that wealth research internally and externally, and others are identified in other ways. Peter, can I pass it back to you to talk a little bit about this?
Thanks, Meredith. This is something that you can't start soon enough. And the earlier you start it, my observation has been the more successful churches have been in meeting and exceeding their campaign goals. But it's one of taking the need, the challenge, and sharing that with others in the church, people that you may be seeing as potential leaders, your various ministries within the church, prior campaign leaders that have brought a wealth of experience in going through a campaign. As Dennis had mentioned, your lead donors, which can be a combination of the wealth report that we could provide, plus a list of your top givers within the church. And out of this group, forming the nucleus of the campaign, which would be the management team. Now, the management team would be a leadership group that typically meets every week or every other week and oversees the day-to-day operations of the campaign. We work closely with this group to stay on target with a calendar of tasks, ideas about engaging the congregation. And then we have something known as an advisory committee, which is a secondary leadership group, but it involves not only the management team, but your volunteer team leaders and also key stakeholders within the church, which may be your top donors, some of your top donors, or some of your key ministries. And that becomes a monthly meeting, which you would serve as a communication or an update meeting. You would hear about how the teams are doing. There's an opportunity for asking questions of leadership about the direction of the campaign and any challenges that we're experiencing. So the two leadership groups forming them is the nucleus of the campaign, management team being more an executive level, advisory committee being more of a college board type of group.
Hey, Peter, I got a quick question for you. I know you're working at St. Catherine Drexel. How many months or years was their organizing committee active before the feasibility study?
So yeah, quite a bit of time was spent, nearly 3 years before their feasibility study ever took place. But with that came a lot of organization and information that not only could they share with the parishioners, but actually came from the parishioners. And it was one of the few churches that I've worked with that actually had their campaign slogan and logo completed before we even started a feasibility study. So there's a lot of direction that be given ahead of time, and it keeps parishioners engaged, where it answers a lot of their questions up front and has them more involved in the process.
Yeah. Now, Christian has the good fortune to work with perhaps the best church development client ever in the history of capital campaigns. And I don't know if it's your magic or them, but IAC in Colorado Springs is like did all of this and more. They even did surveys like 4 per year getting ready for this. Do you mind talking for a minute about IAC?
Sure. I think they're a great example of things that go well or doing well. As a community, their leaders are already very engaged. And so it was kind of almost like just mobilizing the different parts of the community and the congregation for the campaign that they're involved in now. And so I think for me, it's been interesting to see how important, to echo what Peter said, engagement is, even, not thinking of it just as, oh, now we get people engaged, but how can we keep people engaged through the feasibility study? What are the things that are happening already that show engagement, and how can we be involved in that as consultants? That's kind of been how I've been thinking of this. Who are the groups that are doing things and organizing that we need to make sure that are key stakeholders? And I think that includes obviously folks that are donors, but also people that just have the pulse of the community and they know what's going on. I think that's a really valuable group of folks to know what's going on and to have good insight. So I mean, for Colorado Springs, I think what they do really well is they're very attuned to making sure that the folks who have that are stakeholders across the organization, both with their financial sort of gifts, but also with their sort of the vibe, understanding the vibe of the community, they're involved for all things. They're involved for worship services and deciding lots of parts of those, lots of parts of the worship. They're involved in anything that you can imagine that's a facet of the congregation. They have ways for folks to advise, and the leadership team is always pulling in voices from folks who are involved in the congregation. And so when we came to be a part of it, it was that this was already a natural and organic process for them. And so for me, it's been great to see that this isn't something, the feasibility study, the capital campaign doesn't just start and then end. It's something that should really be adopted throughout the whole organization and strengthens it and keeps folks involved. And they're not just involved peripherally, they have a big stake in what's happening. And so I think for me, that's been great to see and to get to reflect here in this discussion.
Kristen, I really appreciate you sharing that about your observation there. And that's absolutely our goal is for our capital campaigns, not to just be something that happened once at the parish, but it's a transformational process that happens at the community level in which everybody becomes a little bit more invested, involved, engaged in their faith community. So that's beautiful to see it happening on the ground.
Yeah.
Moving it along, we're going to try to keep it on time for 1 hour. I know everybody's very busy, and I think we're doing good with that. But the next step here that we're going to talk about is building consensus. We've touched on that a little bit with the previous two slides, but this is just such an important part of the capital campaign. And it begins long, long, long before the capital campaign starts. As we said, we're talking about this capital campaign as a transformational process. How are we getting everybody engaged and involved in decision making so that it is truly their parish, it's their congregation, it's their faith community? Peter, can you talk about how the long range plan kicks that off
Absolutely.
or plays a part in that?
Absolutely, Meredith. And you're so right that it begins at the very early stages. It never really stops. But in its core essence, you have the reason why you're having a campaign. Why are you doing this? And that's, buried within the vision and mission statements of the case statement, really, for the entire campaign. And it's something that you just don't say, well, we need more room or a bigger gathering space. Okay, why? And to connect it to the vision about evangelizing the action and how that creates fellowship and goodwill and community within the church, and to establish that reason and keep repeating that same message. And then there's a series of events that occur where the entire parish congregation is involved and interacting with the vision, the mission, and the plans that the church is developing, sharing the plans, asking the members of the church, what do they think? What input can they have? What questions do you have that we could answer? And that's done in a variety of events, from big town hall meetings to finely tuned focus groups that can be in a large setting, or it could be maybe in someone's home, to where you have a small group that gathers, but are able to more intimately interact with the needs of what they have about the plans, etc. So Dennis, how would you add to that?
The church pictured here, Curie of ours, did exactly that. Item F. They did a facility needs assessment 1 year before we did our feasibility study. So they really got on it early. And then, of course, the parish is very well managed. They have a superb parish manager. She could be a CEO at a big company, I am sure of that. But she was wise enough to make it a widespread engagement process. And then, as Peter talked about earlier, lots of information sharing. But there was one moment right before we started the feasibility study where everybody was reminded about the facility needs survey. And then something mystical happened. If you look up there at the ceiling, one of those boards came loose and fell down into church. Church was not in session, but somebody was in there and they saw a huge booming noise and part of the roof on the floor. And then they had to kind of close the church for a couple of weeks while they dealt with that. And I'm just thinking to myself, is that the hand of God? Or did somebody get there early one day and just take something loose so we'd all pay attention? That happened in another church, Hillcrest Christian Church. I remember it. And I remember it because, like, 1 week before Commitment Sunday, it rained and water was coming in through the roof. And they had a very young, nimble, athletic associate pastor who everybody thought came in the night before with a portable drill and just drilled holes to make a point. Like, I don't know if that's true, but it certainly helped us get a high level of involvement in the building of consensus. There's no denying we've got to do some work because that panel fell off the ceiling.
I feel like we need to add some sort of like side note that we're not endorsing people
Correct.
vandalizing their buildings. Like I would like to just add that to the line of this particular moment. You tell such a good story, Dennis, that I don't know if people are going to take that part away from it. So
Yeah,
I thought making it explicit would be good.
yeah, don't get up on a ladder just to make a point.
Yeah, we're not endorsing that. We're
No,
not,
no.
but it is convenient, it sounds like.
Yeah, the hand of God.
Oh, that is so
Okay.
good.
All right, Meredith, let's move on to the next one. Okay.
Yes. Go ahead, take it away.
Okay, so we'll run through this not too quickly, but rather quickly. And that's doing a feasibility study to give you data to support the level of appetite of the members of your church for a capital campaign. And it begins with interviews, in-person interviews with some of your top donors, maybe community leaders, where you bring them in, and we actually would do interviews of the survey with them directly and collect their comments and expand upon it, any thoughts that they have. And then provide online and paper surveys for the rest of the church so that everyone in the parish, in the congregation, has an opportunity to give their input. Paper surveys, you might say, well, why is that? Well, some aren't that comfortable doing things on a computer. Some may have just see a paper survey laying in the gathering space and pick it up and be moved to do it then. And then provide a report with the recommendations as a result of that study, with a financial forecast on the probability of the amount that could be raised. And then finally, something that's very critical, and that is, have you put the church in your estate plans, and asking that question in the feasibility study. There may not be any greater source of wealth for a church than what lies in estate plans. Now, you certainly have a top donor who may have $1 million or maybe a couple of million that leaves as a gift to help a building fund, et cetera. But overall, for a parish as a community, the estate planning process brings the greatest amount of wealth. It isn't necessarily wealth that you're going to realize today or maybe next year or maybe even 5 years down the road, but it plans for future generations and provides that self. I had a conversation with a pastor one time. He asked about planned giving, and he said he regrets that he never did anything with planned giving. If he had started that 10, 20 years ago, I, as he said to me, may not have needed your services. And I said, well, let's not go too crazy here, but you would have had a lot more money. The other thing is, this is another message that is repeated over and over. We ask about the estate plans and the feasibility study. Ask about them if they would consider it on the pledge card, if they have interest in learning more about it. And then finally, if you do a planned giving campaign, to raise that issue once again and provide educational workshops on how it gets done. So Meredith, I hope I wasn't too quick. Christian, anything you would add to that?
You know, I love a feasibility study conversation, Peter. I mean, it's just, I think one of the things that folks don't realize about research studies is that oftentimes when you ask a question, you're also planting a seed and framing how someone is seeing something. So when you ask the question, have you put the church in your estate plans? You're planting a seed. It's not just it's not this simple like extraction of information. So, I think what's really helpful about church development in our process is that we're very attuned to these social dynamics and really understand that asking questions isn't just about getting information. It's about kind of assessing and seeing where folks are at and also planting seeds for later. So when you're preparing, you're thinking about this as a whole process. You're not thinking about this as like, I don't know, like I'm a musician, so like staccato notes. It's not like you're just doing one thing and then it goes away. This is all a part of a process. And so when you think about the feasibility study or even the work before this, you're trying to integrate it throughout the whole process and asking questions and getting folks to think. That's a part of that process. And so that's why these types of studies are so valuable, not just for the numbers that come out of them, but for the seeds that you're planting in the folks that you're discussing things with. And even when we share this report information, we're planting seeds. So we know all of that. And I think it's kind of fun and savvy to think about how this can be contributing to the culture of your conversation in your congregation or parish. So I just love feasibility studies, and I think they're really valuable, and I hope folks can see them in new ways, maybe.
Yeah, I really appreciate too, both of your comments about Peter talking about and bringing up the planned giving aspect, and Christian, using that metaphor of planting seeds, especially as it relates to how, this webinar is talking about the front end pre-campaign, but just mentioning very quickly our follow-up process. So when we are hired to help manage a capital campaign at a parish, we don't say see you later after commitment Sunday. We stick with that parish for 3 years following their commitment Sunday, and a lot of that is focused on, of course, tracking pledges and making sure that there's a that there's consistency with everything that we've built already, but the planned giving aspect is a huge part of it. Dennis, can you speak to, you have something to say?
Yeah, at the picture, the church portrayed in the photo here, during the feasibility study, one of their members many years ago attended here and then moved away. And she was one of the first people to work at Cerner, which is a big, gigantic software company. And, in her 30 or 40-year tenure there, she accumulated a great deal of stock options. And she made a decision. She articulated her intention in the feasibility study. And she basically said, if you do this thing, which was on their list of priorities, I really think that's important. I'll pay for that thing. And it was $1 million. And we wouldn't have known that if we didn't do a feasibility study. Dan Dahlquist, one of our team members, he told me a story about something very similar. In the feasibility study, one congregant said, if you do this thing, I'm good for $500,000. So it's happened to us enough that we are kind of looking for that. What's going to kind of come in from left field? Pardon me.
Yeah, definitely. And just to give people a sense of the timeline for the feasibility study, what does that look like? This is our chart for the timeline and the specific action steps that happen within a feasibility study. I'm not expecting anyone to read all of this right now, but just to get a sense of a visual, it's about a 6-week process. If anybody wants to comment on anything in here, feel free to now. Otherwise, like I said, the slides will be available after the webinar, so you can look at this more in depth if you'd like to do that. But the final step that we are going to recommend in preparing for and getting ready to do that capital campaign launch is communicating the vision. So taking everything that we've already talked about, how are you going to put that together and deliver it to the announcement that the capital campaign is starting? Peter, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, Meredith, thank you. I think a key word, focus on the why and evangelizing, the reason for doing that. And that's so important, and that really resonates with church members for generations. And then we have various tools in terms of what we use to communicate, all the way from church-wide events and presentations to recapping that with newsletters and videos and emails. And social media is so important because you may only get 15 to 20% of your church members actually attending a church event, but you want 100% of your members to see your message. So these suggestions on how you can do that are very important.
This case study right here, St. Thomas More, you see the portico, and then behind it, you see the great big glass triangle. And that's what their project was. And we worked really hard to get consensus to create a foyer, a narthex. Now, I learned at that time, your narthex is supposed to be 1/3 the size of your worship space. That's like an architectural guideline. I just learned about that. And we really got some hard pushback, people saying, oh, that's dumb, it's superfluous. We only go to church to pray. Well, that's kind of true, but our community has literally no space to interact. So that building right there, the original building, had a narthex that was about 20 by 20. and they would have 500 people at worship at each worship service. So it was just impossible. It was just basically an airlock. And to focus on the why was really important. We need a place to interact and congregate and build that sense of community. We know for sure that social interaction is vital to the well-being of a church. And when it was over and it was up, those people who complained, they were the first ones to say, "This is awesome. This is the best thing ever."
Mhm.
Okay, Meredith, back over to you.
Yes, okay, so just a final step on how do we put all these things together? Recommendations for making it happen. We really, really suggest that you don't have to call this person your campaign chairperson. Maybe they will turn into that, but pick one person to kind of be in charge of organizing the effort to make this list of things happen, get the ball rolling. They're not going to be in charge of getting everything done. They're not going to do everything themselves. Quite the opposite. They're going to be overseeing the community effort, which kind of gets to the second part. We're going to get a committee together to work through these tasks. Make sure that your pastor is fully on board, and then make a calendar to give yourself some accountability and some deadlines for when you're going to hit some of these benchmark goals for pre-campaign activities. Peter, would you like to talk a little bit about how you've seen these four recommendations play a part?
Oh, absolutely. And again, my observation has been the earlier in the game that you do these things and the more effectively you do them, the greater return you get in terms of the results of your campaign. Finding your leader within the church, someone who is well respected, very active in the church, highly intelligent, organized teams, is going to be critical. And then, of course, the committee that work through the task of your leadership team. Pastor naturally has got to be fully on board and is more likely kind of the igniter for these campaigns. And then finally, to keep yourself on task, having a calendar of activity of things that you need to complete before you even get started in terms of how you're going to engage leaders, when you're going to do that, and what results you're going to use to communicate to the rest of the parish.
I was going to jump in and say that, this slide and this conversation reminds me of the previous slide, which is, I'm sure, something Meredith already planned, but these all connect to the why. The first person that you're choosing to be the spearhead for your campaign should really be invested in that why and should be an advocate for that why. And the folks that are on the committees are also a reflection of especially we have the structure that we use it here. Church development kind of relies on several teams. So those team leads really need to have a clear vision of the why and a clear sort of buy-in to understanding, because that is how you sort of spread that excitement throughout your community. And so, I think what we've been talking about and what Peter shared, the why is connected to all of this. It's not separated from it. And the folks that are most passionate about this are going to be the ones that will help along the campaign, but will also be excited about the ways that these ripples affect the rest of the community and the rest of your parish and the rest of your congregation. So just the why for me is just so important in this action, and that folks are connected to that who are in leadership.
Absolutely. Dennis, final thoughts?
Yeah, my final thought is, please, everyone listening, buy the book, Why Catholics Don't Give. It was written by a Catholic professor at Villanova, a Catholic university. And it really dug into the question, why do Catholics give 1.2% of their income and Protestants give 2.2%? And the items that we have discussed today address all those failures that were identified in the book, Why Catholics Don't Give. And to summarize it, Peter has said it over and over again: organization where you are engaging people, and lots of communication. So the engagement and the communication, that's just the magic formula. And this book was fairly caustic in its self-examination, but great leadership needs the cold hard facts. And so if we want to raise more money, read that book to avoid failure. And my final comment is, consider the great American philosopher Chuck Norris, who once said, the key to success is to figure out what doesn't work, then don't do that. Okay. And these are the things to do. So if you do this, you're going to have a successful capital campaign. That's my 2 cents.
That's just perfect advice. Now, following up with the one not to do, we are going to send you a summary of what to do, which is basically this slideshow in a format that you can use and edit for your particular congregation, our getting started checklist. We will send that out with the recording of this webinar within 24 hours. And then we invite you to contact us, Dennis, or schedule a consultation through our website to field questions with us. What are your roadblocks that you're experiencing in your parish or congregation? Where are you bottlenecking? Where are you kind of stuck with making a decision about moving forward with the next step? And we're happy to give you an estimate for a feasibility study and even kind of a preliminary financial forecast of what you might be able to raise in a capital campaign. So we welcome you to use any of those resources that might be helpful for you. And then also just a quick little introduction, we are going to be launching a printed version of our step-by-step guide to conducting a church capital campaign. It's a book, and it will be coming out sometime in this spring or early summer. So stay tuned for our next webinar announcement. Subscribe to our e-newsletter at our website, church-development.com, and that's where we send out invitations to those events. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. We hope that you found this presentation to be helpful and encouraging, and we welcome any requests for additional support via the channels that I mentioned before. So thanks again to all our consultants and to Dennis too for a great presentation.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye all. Thank you for joining us.
Bye.